Hello and welcome to another episode of Into the Afroverse. I am your host, William Jones, and Into the Afroverse is where we take Black folks into the future.
Today we are joined by Mr. Tim Fielder. Tim Fielder, if you don't know, is an illustrator, concept designer, a cartoonist, an animator, and he was born in Tupelo, Mississippi, and raised in Clarksdale, Mississippi. He has a lifelong love of visual Afrofuturism, pulp entertainment, and action films. He holds other Afrofuturists, such as Samuel Delaney, Octavia Butler, Pedro Bell, and Overton Lloyd as major influences. He is known for the graphic novel Infinitum, an Afrofuturist tale published by HarperCollins Amistad in 2021, and the Glyph Award-winning Maddie's Rocket. And with that, I'd like to welcome Mr. Tim Fielder. How you doing, Tim?
Hello, sir. Thank you for having me on your program. This is a big deal. Thank you so much, man.
No, thank you. I really appreciate you joining us today. We have artists like yourself on. I always like to get an idea of what is it that puts you on this path that got you started. Because one of the things that we have a lot of artists, a lot of creatives that are listening, and I think they find it inspirational when they can hear about other people's journeys. So what is it about your journey that puts you on this path to the artist that you've become?
Wow. Okay. Well, first of all, start drawing very young, around, I guess, 5 or so, 4 or 5. And I come from a family of 4 siblings. I have I have a twin brother who's 5 minutes older and 2 older siblings. And we all grew up artists. In fact, everybody is an artist to this day. And, everybody's in their 50s now, except for the oldest who just hit, he turns 61 tomorrow, which is crazy.
Wow, congrats.
So we've been grinding for decades as working artists. So we grew up as comic book artists, and I've said this before in other interviews, being the youngest, you don't really have any control of what the entertainment is. So literally, hey, a pencil was put in front of me and a crayon and now draw.
Right.
So, and that's what it was. So I kept doing it. And I'm the one who kind of stuck with the kind of representation or illustration of comics, because that was our thing, Marvel, DC, and of course soon to be heavy metal and underground comics. So that's how I grew up. It would stay on that path, with heavy metal, things like that, which really changed my life. The work of Mobius, and Inky Bilal and Philippe Drouet and all those guys with Lon Sloan, Delirious, and all those books really hit me in a really amazing way. But a lot of underground comics, or I would say alternative comics of the 70s, works by like Gene Day, Paul Ricochet, all those guys who were from Canada. And they did these really amazing kind of, I guess now you would call them obscure books, like Andromeda, was a science fiction comic that was released out of Canada. And it was just Dean Marder, who would eventually go on to do a lot of work in mainstream comics, was the person who started that. And they would do adaptations of science fiction stories, like Arthur C. Clarke, James Tiptree, all those type of things. And it was pretty amazing to see in the late 70s. So that had a tremendous effect on me in terms of the comic space. Howard Chaykin, things like that, with his stories. But then Star Wars hit.
Right.
And, I was one of those idiot kids, because when Star Wars came out, I think I was 10, maybe 10 to 11. I forget. It was, came in what? So no, I was 11. I was about to turn 11 because I was born in 66. So Star Wars came out in 77. So I was just about to turn 11. And I was one of those idiot kids in Clarksdale who grew up right across the street grew up on a junior college campus, but across the street from a cotton field. I was one of those idiot kids that memorized Star Wars. I'll explain to you what I mean. When you said, what do you mean you memorized Star Wars? So that was in like the beginning of the merchandising thing.
Right.
This is before Lucas had retained he retained his rights. He didn't sell his rights, and 20th Century Fox didn't understand what they were giving away.
Right.
So when they released the LPs or vinyl for Star Wars, they didn't just release the soundtrack, they released the actual movie.
Right.
So in 1978, 79, I'm listening to the LP that had the first half of the movie, dialogue, acting, Alec Guinness, sound effects, everything playing on side one, and then you go to the B side and they have it to the resolution of the movie. I listened to that thing so many times I learned the lines of the movie. So that happened. So that changed my work dramatically. Ralph McQuarrie, John Barry and Joe Johnson, these fantastic concept designers who changed my work, where it moved from kind of a superhero-y kind of psychedelic thing to, when you add Mobius in there, all of a sudden I began to understand the importance of environments and technology and things like that. So I began to do that. So finished high school, I'm jumping forward. Well, I almost finished high school. I was around 13, 14. And our oldest brother went to school at Howard University, where they studied a lot of Black aesthetics. Came home, pulled my coattail about the type of work I was doing, which really primarily had white characters. There was major Black characters, but I wasn't really focused on the Black aesthetic of things. I just was, I want to draw Luke Skywalker.
Right, right.
And then he pulled my coattail on it. And I've said this before, he did it in such a way where it was so monumental how he pulled me, because I had created this, and I said this before, I created this older swordsman. He had this double swords, and he was in this military kind of uniform. And I called him the Master. Which is like, he said, are you looking at what you're doing? I'm like, what do you mean? He said, you're calling this white character the Master.
Wow.
But it never occurred to me, oh my God. Because at the time I was, 13 years old.
Exactly.
So instead of being rebellious, I went all Black. Oh, God, why did I do that? And I have been basically repeating the idea of Black culture, Black aesthetics, but trying not to always be on the nose. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. I've gone through different iterations. So from the age of 13, 14 on to now 56, it's been a grind, my friend. So that is how I started.
Excellent.
It's been a grind.
Excellent. Now, before we get back into the conversation with our guest today, I want to talk about one of this episode's sponsors. Here at Into the Afroverse, we often talk about the various mediums of art and storytelling and how they can be used for positive social change, especially for Black people worldwide. Well, in the city of Philadelphia, known for its arts and culture, a fantastic organization called Mural Arts Philadelphia believes that art ignites change. Because of their work, Philly has become the mural capital of the world. You should travel there to check it out. Listen to this message from Mural Arts.
For over 35 years, Mural Arts Philadelphia has focused on using art not just to beautify, but as a means to provide creative solutions to address Philadelphia's most challenging issues. From giving a second chance to justice-impacted individuals, to welcoming immigrants and refugees with open arms, to amplifying the voices and ideas of the next generation. Mural Arts continues to inspire and empower. We believe in the transformative power of creativity. Art is more than just paint on a wall. Art ignites change.
And if you're just joining us, this is Into the Afroverse with your host, William Jones, and we're joined today by Mr. Tim Fielder. And I'm going to say artist extraordinaire because I really admire his work. One of the things that I noticed when I talk to artists, and I had this experience as well, as a Black artist, there's this time where, for many of us, as you mentioned, we're caught up in the white aesthetic. We're drawing these heroes, these characters, and so forth. Why do you think that is, as far as like young people and artists? And it may seem simple in terms of an answer, but for yourself, why do you think it is that so many Black artists and Afrofuturistic artists and so forth go through that phase? Because we hear that story over and over again. I was drawing white characters, I was drawing white heroes and so forth. And like you said, someone told me about the coattails, or someone asked me a question of, why aren't you drawing yourself? Why do you think that's such a common experience for a young artist?
Well, Black culture is African culture.
Right.
African American culture is American culture, in which it originated from African culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really matter why we were pulling from something, because, as descendants of slaves, obviously we had to deal with all the things that come from that, being inundated by images from white culture, never seeing yourself as the center of attention, always, particularly if it's a Black male character, being maimed or killed on screen, being secondary in books, and basically swimming in that for generations. So when you grow up like that, you don't see anything wrong with it, because that's all you know.
Right.
Until that event comes, which changes your state of mind. I would say that has not made me a lucrative, it's not made me a rich man. It has not.
Right.
But and I think I answered your question. I'm just saying it's part of the rite of passage as an Afrofuturist. I mean, you're an Afrofuturist, the score.
Exactly.
Our job is filling in the missing components. That's our job.
Right.
And it is not glamorous. Well, maybe it's a little bit glamorous lately, but prior to the last 3-4 years, it's not been glamorous. It has been a soul-sucking grind where you're generally working without attention being paid to your work, or a kind of for lack of a better term, a kind of a segregated attention. You were, I'm known in this area, which that wasn't me, that was some other guys who certainly, they're known in this particular sector, but then they're not known outside of that sector. Those things have changed now. Technology doesn't care.
Right.
Technology doesn't care about, for the audience, William and I participated in this kind of what do they call it? Foresight training.
Yes.
We were actually literally engaged in the process of generating content, whether it be images, papers, essays on what is going to happen with Black America.
Right.
And we spent, I guess, a year on that, but then we had that one intense session that lasted about 2 weeks online, and it was 20-30 Afrofuturists at the height of it.
Right.
So that question is important that you're asking, but folks who are younger than us won't have to do what we did. Our job, sadly, was to run through that wall, and boy, does it hurt.
Yes.
Oh my God. But at least I am happy and satisfied with the fact that we're doing our jobs.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're doing our jobs. And of course, due to the events of the last 2 months, but really since earlier this year, what that job is going to be has changed. But that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, that's just a lot of stuff going on, man, that I think is going to require another foresight training.
Gotcha. Definitely.
Oh no, I got to do it again.
Yeah, because when you talked about Star Wars, and I thought about my experience in watching it, and I remember noticing as a young person, that there were no Black characters, and being so excited when Lando Calrissian was introduced in the follow-up, but then by the end of the film, he turns out to be the traitor. He redeems himself eventually, but it was always, like you said, it was always like this drawback to being a Black character, especially like you stated, a Black male in these science fiction fantasy settings where we were either the background character or we were killed off and so forth. So yeah, there's certainly been a lot in terms of young people today don't have to deal with that.
And no Black women at all.
None, exactly. Yes, exactly. So they were just absent, you know, and you know, you had Star Trek, you know, the original episodes, and then there's this huge empty space where Black women are non-existent.
Crazy.
So yeah, so I definitely hear you on that. Now let me ask you this. Well, first of all, before I get into some more questions, how can folks find you and reach you?
Yeah, go to dieselfunk.com for my website. Go to Dieselfunk on Twitter. Go to Dieselfunk on Instagram. Go to Dieselfunk on Mastodon. Go to Dieselfunk on every social media platform. You will find me and find my work. The books that I am primarily known for is Maddie's Rocket Book 1, which you can find on Amazon and you can order it, which was published by my company, Dieselfunk Studios, earlier this year during the Carnegie Hall Afrofuturism Festival. And Infinitum, an Afrofuturist tale, which it was released by HarperCollins last year. And you can go to where all fine books are sold to get my stuff and find me and all that other stuff.
All right. So, you know, instead of me asking about other people's works and talking about Star Wars and, you know, Black Panther and things of that nature, let's talk about your work.
Okay.
What is Maddie's Rocket about?
Maddie's Rocket is an alternative history telling of alternate 1930s, 1940s retro past future in which all of the things that you have inherent in American culture from the 20th century, Jim Crow, racism, all those things are present. And the main character, her name is Maddie Waddy, who is actually named after my great-grandmother, whose name was Maddie Waddy. And she is a space pilot, and she encounters all endeavors of adventure and fantasy and action. That's the long-term way of describing it. The short term is take a Buck Rogers cereal from the 1930s and 1940s, dump in the Casper Stormy Weather, and make the lead Lena Horne, and you got Maddie's Rocket.
I like that. I like that. All right. And Infinitum.
Infinitum, an Afrofuturist tale, is a story which I wanted to do. It been in a few iterations, but the story is about a Black man who has the unfortunate gift of immortality. And he lives through billions of years of history. I did that for your sector. I wanted people who are scholars, people who are journalists, people who are curators such as yourself, writers such as yourself, to be able to say, if someone wanted, hey, can you give me one publication that I can look at and I can see everything that Afrofuturism is, has been, will be? Can you point me to one book? And I wanted you guys to be able to hand Infinitum over to do that. Excellent.
And one more time, where can we find these books?
Where all fine books are sold. You can go online and order them. Infinitum, and is there. And I'm actually right now presently working on Maddie's Rocket Book 2 and 3 at the same time, finishing up. Well, I've turned in my pitch for my middle grade book, Brother Robo.
Okay.
Giant Robot and a little black boy and black girl Joy. And hopefully we'll be very soon working with my cousin Ralph Boston to adapt his life, who's the Olympian who broke Jesse Owens' record back in 1960 in the Olympics. And I hope to be adapting his story as well.
Oh, excellent. Now, when you get those done, you got to come back and talk about it.
Of course,
Because
man.
that sounds, that sounds really interesting. Because that's probably a story that a lot of folks are not even aware of when you talk about breaking Jesse Owens' record and so forth. So that is something I definitely would love to have you come back and talk about.
Of course, you got it. Just let me know when.
Thank you. Thank you. When you talk about knocking down this wall and making it so that young Black people today don't have to go through what we went through in terms of looking for themselves in these spaces, how do you think we can go about making the images that you just described, the stories that you just described, even more impactful on you today? And what I mean is, when you grow up and you're looking at white heroes, white heroines, and so forth, that's having an impact on white culture in this country. It's having an impact on white people in the way that they see themselves. How can we have it so that when these young Black people are coming across books like the ones you just described, the work that you're doing, where they're able to really see themselves in that space and really embrace it and say, that is me or that can be me?
Okay. That is a very deep and complex question.
Right.
It actually has a simple answer to it. But before I answer it, let me quibble with you for a bit.
Sure.
I don't think we actually broke the wall down. I think we're stuck with blood running down our heads and noses, meaning we're still in the process of tearing that wall down.
Right.
That wall is not broken down. That wall has been hit. It's been hit hard, but we've been hit hard as well. So that process is ongoing. So that's the first thing.
Okay.
With regards to that kind of the question you were mentioning is really about representation. And my perception of what is important to be done has kind of expanded over the last 10 years, but definitely over the last 5 years. Like, I have my perception of what Afrofuturism is, right?
Right.
But that perception is absolutely, unequivocally influenced by the fact that I'm a comic book artist, I was a Star Wars head, and it was more from an entertainment point of view. Afrofuturism is literally Black people in spaceships and having adventures. And that's what it is, but that's only part of it. Afrofuturism as a concept is so much more expansive than that. People who are dancers. You're an Afrofuturist, but here you are literally having ongoing podcasts where you interview Afrofuturists, which makes it Afrofuturism. So it's not so important about the type of work that we do. Most important thing is the volume.
Right.
That makes sense. We're no longer in early days yet, per se, when it comes to Afrofuturism. We're now experiencing an explosion of that type of content. And again, totally different conversation. When you're starting to look at the advent of AI and its arrival on the scene, that is going to have planetary geopolitical effects on everything, including Afrofuturism.
Right.
So the lack of images, the lack of words concerning us and speculative content, that's about to go away. We don't have that problem no more.
Right.
So we did when I say we did our job, we did our job. We kept us going, right? It is, when I say volume, it is important that if you are an Afrofuturist, and whatever it is you do, whether you're a dancer, you're a politician, you're a plumber, you're a teacher, you're a writer, you're a comic book artist, you're a filmmaker, the most important thing to remember is that whatever form or format your work is, you must start it and you must finish it. And then when you start it and finish it, you must deliver to market. That is where we are now, because where we are is we're literally building the Afrofuturist economy. It can't just be ideas. It actually has to be products.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like this podcast is a product. It is.
Right.
It's literally it's a product. And that product is literally helping me sell my products. So that is where we are. It is an economy. It's an ecosystem. And the more content you put into that ecosystem, whether it be legal work, whether it be political work, whether it be social political work, it's like building a house. You start with the foundation.
Right.
Now we're past that. Now we're starting to, we're not into where we're putting the fascia or anything on there. We ain't there, but
right.
The plumbing is being put in place. Let me put it to you that way. We're not where we were in 1989.
Agreed.
We're not there anymore. It's like, think about it. You and I, along with 40 other people, were in a foresight training with a think tank talking about how Afrofuturism applies to African culture, the African diaspora.
Right.
That never would have happened. That wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. You know what I mean? That wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. Not in the way it did. People say, well, there's been plenty of gatherings, not with a quote, I'm putting on my quotation fingers here, not with a by the numbers, standard, mainstream, white-based think tank. You know what I mean? They actually partnered with us, which is why it was so, remember, it would constantly happen during the meetings where they would be talking about one subject, like nuclear proliferation, which is important.
Right.
Like, well, yeah, that's cool, but I think you should focus more here about jobs and things like that.
Exactly.
Well, we need to concentrate on nuclear proliferation. It's like, yeah, but if you can't get a job,
right.
I mean, nuclear proliferation is important. Don't get me wrong, but we're concerned about people starving, right? That's what we did. So I think it's the granular work, which is what we're doing now. That's the thing. It's the little small stuff that we're having to do that will ultimately build up to a larger whole. The only thing I feel bad about, and this is gonna sound really petty, it's like basketball, right? So you had Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan, and they were great, right? And they made millions of dollars, right? But compared to people like Julius Erving and all those players who played in the 70s didn't make even they didn't make even close to the amount of money they made.
Right.
Now you look at what's happening here. We're in the 2020s, and kids are getting signed to play basketball. They're multi-gazillionaires right out the box.
Right.
So when I say petty, meaning that there's going to be some Afrofuturist who is doing work similar to you and I, and like other people, our colleagues, probably in another 10 years, and they're going to be like Jay-Z. You got to have an Afrofuturist that's going to own an island, man.
Right.
That's what's going to happen. And they're going to like, what are you? Oh, I'm an Afrofuturist. That's what they're going to call themselves, right?
Right.
And that's, I say petty because they're like, I want an island too. But at the same time, man, won't that be awesome?
Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
So awesome.
And to know that you've been a part of it.
Yeah.
You know what, Tim, unfortunately, we are coming up close to the end of today's episode, but I do want to have you come back because I want to continue with some of these great points that you just alluded to. I want to expand on a few of those, especially the idea of getting some royalty checks from future Afrofuturists. That's something we definitely going to get no future.
Man, come on.
So once again, Brother Tim, thank you so much for joining us today. And like I said, I do want to have you come back and continue this conversation. So that's going to do it for today. And thank you once again for joining us here on Into the Afroverse with your host, William Jones. We're taking Black folks into the future on 1450 WOL 95.9 FM, where information is power. And a special shout out to Mr. Duke Productions for producing today's episode. Thank you. Have a good day.